How do you make a bully expose themselves? My bully mocked me so relentlessly that he set off a school shooting lockdown. It all began when I was sitting by myself in the cafeteria. TJ snatched my free lunch tray and hurled it into the trash, smiling as 30 kids watched him literally rip food from a poor kid's mouth for entertainment. Oops. Looks like you'll have to wait for food stamps. But every time I told my parents about it, the response was always the same. Sometimes life throws you into a corner so tight, so unfair, that you feel like you have no choice but to break something. And what if that something isn't just a rule or even a person, but your entire family's future, shattered by one stupid, impulsive press of a button? What would you do if you had to risk everything just to survive? My parents always told me, please, just stop causing trouble. You see, TJ's family? They basically own this town. Half the businesses, including the crummy diner where both my mom and dad worked brutal double shifts, belong to them. So, for me, standing up to TJ wasn't just about a schoolyard fight. It meant our family losing everything, getting evicted, becoming homeless. And he knew it. He knew it all too well. But on that particular Tuesday, TJ had something truly awful cooked up. We were in Miss Lewis's history class, and the second she got called to the office, he spun around. Hey, food stamps. Where are your friends at? My heart was already thumping. I just stared at my Chromebook, trying to disappear, but I could feel my hands starting to shake. That familiar, helpless tremor. Then he started rummaging through my backpack, my desk, like he owned my life. That's when he found it, the photo. Tucked inside my notebook, a picture of me and my mom at her citizenship ceremony. Her proudest moment. His eyes lit up with malicious glee. Oh my gosh, he sneered, holding it high. Is this your mom? Look at her, crying. He started doing this exaggerated, fake Chinese accent. I'm so happy to be American. I cleaned toilet real good now. The entire class went absolutely silent. I give good happy ending. I learned from my son. My face burned. I could feel the blood rushing to my cheeks. What's wrong? TJ grinned, enjoying my humiliation. Can't take a joke? Maybe that's why your dad drinks so much. I'd drink too if. Shut up. The words exploded out of me before I could even think. Ooh, he speaks. TJ scoffed, turning to the class. Hey everyone. The yellow poverty boy found his voice. Then he did something truly sickening. He pulled out his phone. No, not this. It was a video from his dad's diner. My mom was cleaning tables at 2 in the morning, and some drunk, belligerent customer was yelling at her. She was just taking it, nodding, apologizing for something that wasn't even her fault. Anything to keep food on our table. Anything. TJ cranked the volume all the way up. Yes, sir. So sorry, sir. I fix right away, sir. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, see her shoulders sagging in defeat. The whole class, all of them, watched my mother get humiliated in high definition. That's when my eyes landed on it, a small, red button tucked under Miss Lewis's desk. Your whole family's pathetic, TJ continued, oblivious to the shift in my gaze. At least my parents own things instead of cleaning them. In that moment, something inside me just snapped. The shaking stopped. Everything went quiet. I looked at TJ, then at that button. A strange calm washed over me. You know what, TJ? I said, my voice eerily level. You're right. You're so much braver than me. He blinked, clearly taken aback. Obviously, he scoffed. So brave that you'd do anything, right? Not like scared little me. What are you talking about, you freak? I leaned back in my chair, feeling a weird power. There's a button under Miss Lewis's desk. A red one. Go on. Press it. The room went absolutely still. Every eye was on us. Why would I? TJ demanded, his bravado wavering. Because you won't, I countered, watching his face. All that tough guy stuff? It's just Daddy's money. Take that away and you're nothing. Too scared to press one little button. His face turned a furious shade of red. I'm not scared of anything. Prove it. That's stupid. That's what I thought. I turned away, a smirk tugging at my lips. Guess the Little Son family was all talk. Your dad acted tough at the diner, too, but everyone knew he was just. TJ slammed his hand down on my desk, the metal clanging. Shut your mouth about my family. He stormed over to Miss Lewis's desk. The entire class held their breath, a collective gasp. His finger hovered. This is what actual courage looks like, he announced, his voice booming. Click. For 10 long seconds, nothing happened. TJ started laughing, a high, nervous sound. You're so pathetic. We, W.O. W.O. Police sirens. They weren't just passing by. They were heading straight for us. Then the principal's voice blasted over the intercom. Distorted and urgent. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Red and blue lights pulsed through every single window. I could hear the thrum of a helicopter overhead. TJ was still by the desk, frozen, his face ashen. It was just a button. Hands visible. Nobody move. A SWAT team, burst through the door, rifles drawn. TJ dropped to the floor, sobbing, incoherent. He told me to. He made me. They evacuated the entire school. Mr. Littleson, TJ's dad, had to push through a throng of news cameras just to get to his son, his face purple with rage. The expulsion was immediate. Turns out, pressing a school's emergency threat button? That's a felony. Who knew? My revenge, though it was short-lived. That very night, my parents came home from the diner, their shoulders slumped, their faces utterly defeated. They'd both been let go. No explanation needed. We all knew why. I figured, okay, that was it. TJ was expelled. My parents were unemployed. But at least it was over. I was so wrong. A week later, there was a knock at our door. It was Mr. Littleson. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just strolled right in the second my mom opened it, not even bothering to take off his shoes. Your son, he began, his voice dangerously calm, cost me a lot this week. Bad publicity. Legal fees. My son's future. He turned his steely gaze on me. But I'm willing to make all these problems go away. My mom squeezed my hand, a silent plea. Just hear him out, she whispered. All you have to do, Mr. Littleson continued, surveying our cramped apartment with thinly veiled contempt, is agree to my terms. The words that followed made my blood run cold. It was then I realized that getting his son expelled wasn't enough. Not even close. I had to utterly destroy him. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, laying papers across our worn kitchen table like a dealer at a poker game. Simple terms, he said, as my mom's grip on my hand tightened even more. Your son goes in front of the school board next week and tells everyone he tricked my boy into pressing that button. He slid the first paper towards us. My name was already typed at the bottom, just waiting for a signature. It detailed how I admitted to manipulating an innocent student into triggering a false emergency. Then came the second paper, full of dense, convoluted legal jargon. And then he continued, you all sign this NDA about any alleged incidents at the diner or anywhere else involving my family. My dad stood by the sink, his knuckles white from gripping the counter. I could feel his silent fury. In exchange, Mr. Littleson leaned back in our creaky kitchen chair, a smug look on his face. You both get your jobs back tomorrow morning, with full back pay for this week. He paused, letting the offer hang in the air. Or you can keep being stubborn and see how long you last without any income in this town. He stood up, leaving the papers scattered on our table. You have until Monday to decide. He walked out, leaving our front door wide open, his expensive shoes clicking arrogantly down the hallway. No one moved. Not for the longest time. I just stared at those papers, those hateful words, while my mom finally let go of my hand to rub her temples. A silent, desperate gesture. Dad walked over, quietly shut the door, then came back to the table. He picked up the papers, one by one, reading them carefully, his face unreadable. 20 minutes crawled by, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of cars passing outside. "We need those jobs," Dad finally said, his voice raw. But he was looking at me, not Mom. "But I'm not going to force you to lie about what that kid did to you." Mom started crying, soft, desperate sobs, and Dad immediately put his arm around her. "We'll figure something out," he promised, but his voice was shaking. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced. I grabbed my beat-up laptop and started searching. Everything I could find on retaliation labor laws. Most of the legal websites were a confusing mess of big words and obscure statutes, but I kept bookmarking pages that mentioned wrongful termination. I found one site about whistleblower protections, saying employers couldn't fire people for reporting illegal stuff. I wondered if bullying counted. Another page explained how it was illegal to punish employees for their family members' actions. I took screenshots of everything. By 3 a.m., I had about 40 tabs open, my eyes burning, but I couldn't stop. I kept reading about cases where ordinary people sued their powerful employers and won. The next morning, at breakfast, I laid out my findings for my parents. My voice was shaky but determined. "We can't sign anything yet," I urged, watching Mom pour coffee with trembling hands. "Let's just explore our options first. Maybe there's another way." They looked at each other, still scared, but Dad gave a slow nod. "We can wait a few days," he conceded. School felt strange without TJ. Quiet, almost peaceful, except for his buddies shooting me dirty looks in the hallways. After history class, I waited for everyone to clear out, then approached Miss Lewis. She was erasing the whiteboard, her back to me. "Can I ask you something?" She turned, and I could tell from her face she knew exactly what I was going to say. "I was wondering if you'd be willing to confirm that you left the classroom that day when you got called to the office." She put down the eraser, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "I'll think about it," she mumbled, then started packing her bag with unnatural speed. At lunch, I was picking at my bland free replacement meal in my usual corner spot when Tyrone, a kid from the school paper, walked up. "Mind if I sit?" He didn't wait for an answer, just pulled up a chair and his phone. "I've been documenting TJ's crap for months," he said, scrolling through his camera roll. "Got tons of videos from the cafeteria." He turned the screen towards me, and there it was crystal clear. TJ grabbing my lunch tray and tossing it in the trash while everyone laughed. "This one's from last week," Tyrone said, swiping to another video. TJ making those same racist comments about my mom. "Been building a file since my cousin was his target last year." The quality was perfect. You could hear every hateful word, even things I'd blocked out. "Would you share these with the right people when the time comes?" I asked, my voice tight. Tyrone nodded instantly. "Been waiting for someone to actually do something about him," he said, and gave me his number. "Just text me when you need them." After school, I walked the 12 blocks to the community center. Signs for free legal aid on Wednesdays were plastered everywhere. The waiting room was packed, the air thick with tension. The lady at the desk said it would be at least a 3-hour wait, but I signed in anyway. I sat there trying to do homework, watching people shuffle in and out of the tiny offices. Finally, around 6 p.m., they called my name. The attorney was a woman named Allison Novak. Her desk was buried under mountains of papers, and she looked exhausted. But she listened to my entire story without interrupting once. When I finished explaining about my parents getting fired, right after the button incident, she sat up straighter, her eyes suddenly sharp. "Your parents," she said, her voice firm, "have a really strong retaliation case." She started scribbling notes on a yellow pad. They can't legally fire someone because their kid reported bullying or triggered a legitimate safety concern. She reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a business card with her name and the legal aid office number. "Have your parents call me tomorrow morning to set up a formal consultation." She looked back at her notepad. And you need to start documenting everything that's happened. Dates, times, any witnesses who were there. I took the card, nodding, as she emphasized how crucial evidence would be. She told me to write down everything I could remember about TJ and his dad, and to get my parents to do the same for their work issues. When I finally left the office, it was getting dark, and I had to run to catch the last bus home. When I finally walked in, my parents were already eating dinner, their faces etched with worry. I could tell they'd been wondering where I was. I showed them Allison's card, my voice filled with a new kind of hope, explaining everything she'd said about the retaliation case. Mom's hand started shaking again, but Dad looked more hopeful than he had in days. After dinner, I grabbed a notebook. I started writing every single rotten thing TJ had done to me since freshman year. Mom sat next to me, her memory surprisingly sharp, helping me recall specific dates, like the winter dance when he dumped chocolate milk on my head. Dad, meanwhile, got his own paper, meticulously listing all the sudden schedule changes at work, the times Mr. Littleson had yelled at them for no reason. We stayed up until midnight, filling page after page. By the time we were done, we had 12 pages of injustice. The next morning, Mom called Allison's office while Dad was getting ready for his grim job search. They put her on speaker. Allison patiently explained the whole process, what documents they'd need. She said Friday afternoon would work for a meeting, and Dad, without a moment's hesitation, immediately said yes, even though he had a job interview scheduled then. "This is more important," he told Mom after hanging up, his jaw set. At school, everything still felt different without TJ, though his friends still shot me venomous looks in the hallways. During lunch, I walked over to Sarah Cruz. She'd been in our history class when TJ pressed the button, and I knew she'd seen him bully me countless times before. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I asked. She followed me to a quieter spot by the lockers, her eyes darting around nervously. "Would you be willing to write down what you saw TJ do to me?" "I don't want problems with his family," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I reassured her it was just for documentation, that she wouldn't have to testify. She thought about it for a long minute, then finally said, "Okay." I tracked down 2 other kids who'd witnessed TJ's bullying. Galen agreed instantly. TJ had picked on his little brother last year. Nicole took more convincing, but eventually agreed to write something short about what she'd seen. Between classes, the principal's secretary found me. "The principal wants to see you." Immediately. He was sitting behind his enormous desk, hands folded, looking stern. "I heard you've been asking students to write statements," he began, his voice flat. I didn't say anything. "The Littles have been very generous to this school and this community," he continued, his tone a thinly veiled threat. "Their offer to resolve the situation is more than fair." He leaned forward, looking at me over his glasses. "I strongly suggest you consider accepting it, for the sake of everyone involved." I just told him I'd think about it. He frowned but let me leave. After school, as I walked to the bus stop, Miss Lewis called my name from behind. She caught up to me, glancing around conspiratorially to make sure no one was listening. "I wanted you to know," she said quietly. "I'll provide a written statement about leaving the classroom that day. I should have been more responsible, and I'm so sorry you had to deal with TJ alone." She said she'd already written it up and would give it to whoever needed it. I thanked her, and she hurried away, almost running, as if she didn't want anyone to see us talking. Friday arrived quickly. My parents, dressed in their best clothes, were heading to the meeting with Allison. Dad had canceled his warehouse interview without a second thought. "Getting justice," he said, a fire in his eyes, "is worth more." We took 2 buses to the legal aid office, the journey feeling monumental. Allison's office was even more chaotic than before, files everywhere, but she quickly cleared a small space for us. For 2 intense hours, she laid out the path. My parents could file complaints with the State Labor Board and the EEOC for discrimination. "The process could take months," she cautioned, showing us intimidating forms. but you have incredibly strong grounds, especially with the timing of the firing." Then she pulled out another folder, and her expression hardened. "Mr. Little son asking for an NDA?" she explained. "That could actually be witness tampering, given there's a criminal investigation about the emergency button." My parents looked utterly confused, so she simplified it. "This gives us unexpected leverage in negotiations." Saturday morning, Dad's phone buzzed. An unknown number. It was Mr. Little Son. The message read, "Heard you're making things complicated." That would be unfortunate for everyone. It warned us to reconsider his offer before things got difficult for our family in this small town. We all knew exactly what it was, a thinly veiled threat. Dad immediately forwarded the screenshot to Allison, ignoring Mr. Littleson's message entirely. Within an hour, Allison texted back, "This is perfect evidence of harassment and intimidation. Do not respond to him. Document everything. I'll send him a cease and desist letter on Monday." Monday morning came too fast. The moment I walked into school, I could feel the stares. Kids whispered, pointed like I was some kind of freak show. When I turned the corner to my locker, I saw it. "Snitch" was scrawled across the entire metal door in thick black marker. I pulled out my phone, snapping 3 pictures, making sure the timestamp was clear. A group of TJ's friends stood at the end of the hall, watching. One of them made a slow, deliberate, throat-cutting motion. I ignored them, my heart pounding, and tried to open my locker, but the marker was still wet. It got all over my hands. The janitor saw me struggling, came over with cleaner, but just shook his head sadly when he saw the word. During second period, Tyrone found me in the library, his laptop open. He'd written an article for the school paper, "When Protection Becomes Persecution." No names were mentioned, but everyone would know exactly what he was talking about. The article exposed how bullying victims are often punished for reporting, while bullies with money and connections get protected. He'd included statistics on unreported harassment and anonymous quotes from students terrified to speak up. The newspaper advisor had already approved it for Friday's edition. Tyrone said the principal couldn't legally stop it. That afternoon at home, I walked in to find Mom on the phone, speaking rapid, excited Mandarin. She hung up, her face beaming. 3 other workers from the diner had called her, hearing about our situation. They all had their own horror stories about the Littles. Bad treatment, unpaid overtime, forced work through breaks. One woman's cousin had been fired for taking a sick day when her child was in the hospital. Another was forced to work a double shift with the flu, threatened with cut hours if she went home. Mom meticulously wrote down all their names and numbers. They wanted to join whatever complaint we were filing. Tuesday morning, Allison called again. She'd officially filed the formal complaints with both the State Labor Board and the EOC. She'd included everything we'd documented: the timeline, the statements from other workers, the irrefutable evidence of retaliatory firing, the pattern of discrimination against immigrant workers. The complaints were 30 pages long, a damning indictment. She said the agencies had to respond within 30 days, but often moved faster on cases with such clear retaliation. Wednesday afternoon, the news broke. The diner got served with an official notice from the Labor Board. They were under full investigation. They had to provide 2 years of employee records, time cards, pay stubs, scheduling documents. Every single detail. The investigator also wanted to interview current and former employees about working conditions. My mom heard from her friend who still worked there that Mr. Littleson had been screaming into his phone all afternoon. His lawyer had been at the diner for 3 hours straight. Thursday at school still felt weird without TJ, but his friends made sure I didn't forget him. During history class, a paper ball, hard enough to sting, hit the back of my head. I turned around. 3 kids were staring intently at their desks, barely suppressing giggles. The paper on the floor had rat scrawled all over it in angry red pen. Miss Lewis saw it happen, but she just told everyone to settle down. Nothing more. After class, she pulled me aside, apologizing quietly. She said the administration had explicitly told teachers to avoid taking sides in my situation. Friday morning, the detective investigating the emergency button incident called our house. He asked me to explain everything that day again. I laid it all out. The years of TJ's harassment, the photo of my mom, the diner video, his racist taunts. The detective asked if I had proof of the long-term bullying. I told him about Tyrone's videos, about the other students who'd witnessed it. He said he'd need to interview them too, and asked for their contact information. That weekend, my parents seriously started looking for new jobs. It was harder than we thought. The Littles owned the two biggest restaurants, a catering company, and had deep connections with most other businesses in town. Mom applied for a hospital cafeteria position. Dad for 3 warehouses in the next town over. The hospital seemed interested in Mom's experience, but said an opening wouldn't be available for 6 weeks. Dad got a call back from one warehouse, but it was for night shifts. We'd never see him. The next Monday, Allison called with news. Mr. Littleson's lawyer had sent her a letter, offering to settle everything for 1 month of severance pay if we dropped all the complaints and signed an NDA, promising to never discuss the situation publicly. Allison actually laughed when she read it to us over the phone. "It's insulting," she declared, "considering they owe your parents way more than that in unpaid overtime alone from the past 2 years." She was going to counter. Her demand? 6 months' pay, plus damages, plus neutral employment references. Tuesday night, Dad insisted we go to the school board meeting. He wanted to hear what they were saying about the emergency button incident. The auditorium was packed, not just with students, but with furious parents, many holding signs about school safety and bullying now. The board president, looking nervous, announced they were reviewing all emergency procedures and anti-bullying policies. During public comment, parent after parent stood up, furious, sharing stories of how the school had failed to protect their kids for years. One mom recounted her daughter reporting harassment 5 times with 0 action. Another declared that the emergency button incident was a symptom of how desperate kids were becoming when normal channels simply didn't work. Wednesday morning, Mom called me into the kitchen before school, her voice tight with suppressed excitement. She showed me an email on her phone. The hospital wanted to interview her for the cafeteria position next Monday. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled, and I could see her trying to temper her hopes. Dad was at the table, glued to his own phone, refreshing his email every 5 minutes. The warehouse supervisor had promised to get back to him by the end of the week. That same afternoon at school, I was walking to my locker when I saw a crowd of kids huddled around someone's phone, watching something intently. As I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was footage from the day TJ pressed the button. Someone had recorded the entire thing on their phone, and now it was viral. The video showed me, eerily calm, challenging him to press it, and then TJ actually doing it, bragging about his courage. By Thursday, the video had thousands of views, comments, a chaotic mix of people calling me a genius and others accusing me of manipulation. That evening, Allison called with huge news. The labor board had completed their initial investigation at the diner. They found multiple violations: unpaid overtime for at least 15 employees, improper break policies, violations of state law. She explained the magnitude of this. This gave us major leverage. The fines alone would be in the tens of thousands of dollars, and Mr. Littleson would do anything to avoid that kind of public humiliation. She was sending them a new, much higher settlement demand based on these devastating findings. That Friday, after school, I was in the grocery store parking lot when I overheard 2 women talking. They used to work at the diner and never got paid for staying late. One mentioned she'd heard about our complaint through a cousin and was thinking of joining. By Monday, 3 more diner employees officially contacted Allison. The night shift cook, who'd been there 8 years, and the weekend manager, who had meticulously detailed records of all the unpaid hours. That same morning, Mom went to her hospital interview, wearing her best outfit. 2 hours later, she came back with a smile so wide it lit up the whole apartment. They'd offered her the position on the spot. Better hours, full health insurance, even a small signing bonus. Dad, that afternoon, got calls from both warehouses. They both wanted him to start immediately. One was union, great benefits, but a longer drive. The other was closer, but paid less. He chose the union job. The protection, the overtime pay, it was worth the extra drive. Tuesday morning, the principal's secretary found me before first period. The office. Immediately. When I walked in, the principal sat there with Melinda Ward, the school counselor. She gave me that saccharine, fake concerned smile adults use when they think you're a troubled teen. The principal started his spiel about the traumatic emergency button incident, suggesting I talk to someone about my feelings. Melinda nodded along, eagerly suggesting weekly sessions to process what happened and move forward in a healthy way. I saw right through it. They just wanted me to shut up, stop making waves, and let everything blow over. Instead of agreeing, I looked directly at Melinda, my gaze unwavering. Since you're the counselor, could you please pull up all my previous reports about TJ's bullying? Her smile tightened, dissolving into a strained line. I'm not sure what you mean, she said a little too quickly. I reminded her. The 3 times I'd come to her office. TJ taking my lunch, the time he shoved me into a locker, the rumors he spread about my family being undocumented immigrants. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I'd have to check my files, she mumbled. The principal jumped in, trying to steer the conversation. We should focus on moving forward, not dwelling on the past. But I wasn't letting it go. I pushed. I want you, Melinda, to officially document every report I've made that hasn't been acted on. Finally, reluctantly, she agreed to review my file, though she clearly wasn't happy about it. Wednesday, the local 6 o'clock news opened with a story about the labor investigation at several local businesses. And there it was, the diner. The reporter stood outside, talking about the state cracking down on wage theft, how employees were coming forward. They didn't name our family, but a shot of the diner showed a closed sign during what should have been the lunch rush. Every hour they were closed, Mr. Littleson was bleeding money. Thursday, both my parents started their new jobs. The difference was immediate, palpable. Mom came home at 5:30 p.m., not midnight. Dad was actually awake enough to eat dinner with us, to talk, to laugh. They both seemed lighter, like a crushing weight had finally been lifted from their shoulders. With steady paychecks coming from jobs where the Littles had no power over them, they felt truly brave enough to pursue the complaints. Allison called that night. The labor board wanted to schedule official mediation with Mr. Littleson. This is good, she explained. It means they're taking it seriously and they want to resolve it quickly. Friday, Tyrone told me TJ was back in school, but at Riverside High across town. Part of his plea deal with the court. Someone's cousin went there and said TJ kept to himself, his parents driving him everywhere like he was in elementary school. He was seeing a counselor twice a week. No social media. Mediation was scheduled for next month, with a state mediator specializing in employment disputes. Allison came to our apartment Saturday morning to prepare us. She explained we'd ask for back pay for all the unpaid overtime, damages for the retaliatory firing, and, crucially, a non-retaliation agreement. This would prevent the Littles from ever trying to hurt us again through their business connections. Then, Sunday night around 8 o'clock, a knock at the door. Mom opened it, and Mr. Littleson, his face a furious red, fists clenched, pushed right past her into our living room. Dad slowly rose from the couch, his posture stiff. Mr. Littleson pointed at me. You need to drop everything now, he snarled, or things will get much, much worse for everyone. Dad moved, placing himself between us, his voice low and dangerous. Leave, right now, or I'll call the cops. Mr. Littleson stared at him, a tense 10 seconds stretching between them. Then he spun around and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the entire wall shook. Mom immediately locked the deadbolt, threw the chain on. Dad called Allison, telling her what just happened. "Document everything," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. "And if he comes back, call the police this time." The next week at school, huge changes. Cameras were installed in all the hallways and the cafeteria. New signs about reporting bullying appeared everywhere. The principal called an assembly talking about zero tolerance for harassment. Melinda Ward, the counselor, was put in charge of training teachers on how to spot bullying, running workshops every Friday afternoon. I saw her in the hall, lugging boxes of pamphlets about recognizing warning signs. She even gave me this weird, strained smile, like she was suddenly trying to be friendly. The mediation finally happened 3 weeks later in a sterile government building downtown. We sat on one side of a long table with Allison, while Mr. Littleson and his slick lawyer sat across from us, their faces grim. The mediator, an older woman, took notes as everyone spoke. Mr. Littleson's lawyer started with an offer: 3 months back pay if we sign papers agreeing not to sue or speak publicly. Allison actually laughed. "That's insulting," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, considering the years of unpaid overtime and the illegal firing. She pulled out a thick folder, documents showing all the diner's labor violations. Her demand: 6 months' pay, plus damages, plus a written apology from Mr. Littleson admitting his wrongdoing. His lawyer whispered furiously to him, then came back, for months' pay, but still no apology. We went back and forth for 4 grueling hours, with breaks every hour where we'd retreat to separate rooms, strategizing. Mom kept squeezing my hand under the table, a silent communication of fear and hope. Dad meticulously took notes. Finally, around 2 o'clock that afternoon, we reached a settlement for months of back pay for both my parents, continued health insurance for 6 months, and neutral job references. Mr. Littleson never apologized, but he did have to sign papers agreeing to absolutely no contact with our family ever again. 2 weeks later, the labor board announced their findings. The diner was hit with a staggering $30,000 fine. They had to post huge signs about workers' rights in both English and Spanish and pay back overtime to 12 employees, going back 2 years. The local newspaper ran a story about it. A picture of the diner splashed across the front page. Quotes from the labor board about wage theft being a serious crime. Some of the other workers who joined our complaint got their own settlements. One woman used her money to buy a food truck. I saw her one morning, parked right across from the diner, selling better food for less money. She waved at me, a huge, triumphant smile on her face. The state started sending auditors to check the diner's books every 3 months. Weekly payroll reports were mandatory. Mr. Littleson had to hire an accountant just to handle all the new paperwork and oversight. At school, things got so much better. Once everyone saw I wasn't backing down, kids started talking to me, sitting with me at lunch. Tyrone and I became incredibly close, working on articles for the school paper about student rights and standing up to power. He taught me how to research public records. We even found out the Littles owed tons of back taxes on their properties. We didn't publish that, but it was satisfying to know. Mom loved her new job at the hospital. Normal hours, overtime pay when she stayed late. She came home with energy, not looking like a ghost. Dad's union warehouse job meant he couldn't be fired without cause. All safety rules were strictly followed. After a few months, he even joined the union board, helping other workers file grievances. Our apartment felt different now. That constant gnawing worry about money, about losing jobs, it was gone. We could actually save a little each month. Mom started talking about maybe buying a small house someday. About 6 months later, one Saturday, I was at the grocery store, turned a corner, and almost literally ran into TJ. He was with his mom, and he looked different. Skinnier, quieter. We just stood there for a second. Then he gave me this small nod. Not friendly, not mean, just an acknowledgement. His mom quickly pulled him away, But that nod, it felt like something had finally shifted between us. We'd never be friends, not close, but something had changed. The next week, Melinda Ward emailed me, asking me to stop by her office after school. I walked in, and she had a stack of papers on her desk, plus a box of tissues, which felt strange. She closed the door, sitting across from me, not behind her desk. She told me she'd reviewed all the incident reports from the past 3 years. She'd found 17 reports about TJ that never got proper follow-up. Her hands kept nervously shuffling papers as she talked about new protocols. Every bullying report would now require a written response within 48 hours, and parents would get copies of everything. She pulled out a thick manual of specific consequences for each type of harassment. The school board approved hiring 2 more counselors just for conflict resolution. She even showed me a new anonymous reporting app for students. 3 months later, the district's anti-bullying program was recognized by the state education department, receiving a fancy certificate and a $1,000 grant for more training. The local news did a segment. They wanted me to speak at the awards ceremony. I politely declined. I had other things to focus on, like college applications. The acceptance letters started arriving in March. First, a state university with partial aid. Then 2 rejections from expensive private schools. But then the big envelope. My top choice, a full-ride scholarship plus work-study. The financial aid letter mentioned my essay about standing up to systemic oppression and how it aligned with their values. Mom cried when she read it. Dad took a picture to send to his brother. Around the same time, the newspaper ran another story. The Littles were selling their second restaurant location to pay legal settlements. The labor board had expanded its investigation to all their businesses, finding violations at 3 more properties. They had to sell the mini golf place and one of their gas stations just to cover fines and back wages. Their remaining businesses were audited monthly. Weekly compliance reports mandatory. The diner stayed open, but with half the tables it used to have. Graduation day, June. The gym was packed. When they called my name, I walked across that stage, and I could hear Mom yelling something in her language from the bleachers. Dad stood up, clapping so loud people turned to look. After the ceremony, they both hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Mom kept touching the honor cord I'd earned for my grades. Dad just said, "I knew you'd make it through everything." We took pictures by the school sign, and Mom posted them everywhere online. That same week, Tyrone got his acceptance letter from the journalism program at Northwestern, with a $15,000 scholarship for investigative reporting. He texted me a long message. Watching me stand up to the Littles showed him what real journalism could do. He planned to focus on labor rights and corruption in small towns. His first assignment for the school paper next year? A follow-up on our town story. 2 days before I left for college, Mom cooked all my favorite foods. Spring rolls, that soup I loved. Dad grilled burgers outside. We sat at our little kitchen table that wobbled. Dad poured water into the good glasses we never used. He raised his glass, saying something about new beginnings in his broken English. Mom added something about courage in her language. We clinked glasses, eating until we couldn't move. They gave me a card, both their signatures inside, with money they'd saved from their new jobs. Mom's careful handwriting said she was proud. Dad, in big letters, just wrote, "Show them who you are." The morning I left, they loaded my stuff into Dad's truck. The dorm was 4 hours away, but they insisted on driving me. We passed the diner on the way out of town. It looked smaller somehow, fewer cars in the lot. The new employee rights poster in English and Spanish, just like the law required, was clearly visible through the window. Mom pointed at it and smiled. At college orientation, they asked us to write about a time we created positive change. I wrote 3 sentences about the whole thing, then turned it in. The girl next to me had written 2 pages about organizing a beach cleanup, but I was done writing about that. I was ready to focus on what came next. The diner had to pay fair wages now, with overtime and breaks. The school had real protection for students getting bullied. And the little sons? They learned that money couldn't fix everything when you broke the law. None of it happened the way I planned, but it happened, and that was enough. It was a long, brutal fight, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Tell me, what's one moment in your life where you truly stood up for yourself, no matter the cost? I'd really love to hear your stories in the comments below.